Angus Young, how you doing?
Good, Becko.
The Offspring.
How's it going, Becko?
Dave Grohl, how you going, mate?
Good, man.
Pete, it's been a long time coming.
Oh, Becko, hasn't it indeed?
We go inside the dressing room, speak to the biggest names in music,
Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones.
and crack open their esky.
This is exactly how I imagine you, by the way, sitting opposite me with a vodka and orange.
You're a discerning chap. This is The Rider.
Yes, it's Becko. Welcome back to The Rider, part 2 of our catch-up with Tim Rogers from UMI. There's a lot to get through in the next 30 or so minutes. We'll be talking about fun stuff like who he's hung out with backstage, like Gene Simmons from Kiss, Pete Townsend from The Who, Oasis, Angry Anderson. There's a lot to talk about, but also we're going to get serious as well and open up about the struggles with rock music and balancing that with having a family as well. And we'll discuss mental illness with Tim Rogers from UMI. But first up, a serious question. Is there anyone along the way you've sort of thought, I can't believe they're still alive. I can't believe we got through the 90s alive. And I mean, there must be certain people who just push things so hard. And you just think, wow, it's 2022 and they're still here.
Oh, fuck yeah. I had a little communication with Evan Dando a couple of months ago about something. I've never met anyone like Evan ever. He's the most bohemian human I've ever met. I caught up with Richie Lewis of Tumbleweed a couple of months ago at a show I did in Wollongong. Again, a healthy dude, but we just lost a lot of friends. You know, I guess Tumbleweed losing Jay was such a kick in the nuts for that family and for everyone. Stewie Speed of the Twin Set, the band I was in, dying. We've lost so many friends. I guess I was with a very good friend of Brian Hooper's yesterday. Brian Hooper dying a couple of years ago was, again, a massive surprise. One, because he's the best looking guy in rock and roll. But lung cancer. Spencer dying hurt a lot of people. There's a lot of people I run into who are my age, and we do look at each other and go, fuck. I was down in Tasmania with Benny Salter of the Gin Club and Glenn Richards of Augie March, and two of my heroes. And even though we weren't very close when the bands were touring a lot, we did have an opportunity to look at each other and go, hey, we don't all look healthy, but we're alive. No one in particular. I mean, I guess obvious ones, like when I chat to Phil Jamieson, we chat once a week. You know, we give it a nudge, gave it a nudge, continue to give it a nudge. But he does it really well, particularly these days, more importantly than physically, because, you know, physically things are going to get you, and it hurts horribly when friends get very ill. But more often than not, we'll look at each other and go, we've still got it together emotionally, and we're not cynical. My greatest fear since I was about 30 was being the cranky guy at the end of the bar who snarled at everyone. You know, music's not like it used to be. And playing with Hard Ons, I run into a lot of people who are, one, very cynical about me joining the band, and the odd thing being that the Hard Ons are the least cynical people in the world, which is another thing we have in common with you and mine, and that we just don't want to be that cranky guy at the end of the bar. And I remember it was a couple of years ago now, and I was at a bar and I looked over and I saw Ollie Olsen. Now, Ollie Olsen, Melbourne musician, was in one of the very early Melbourne punk bands, Whirly World, and in the Young Charlatans with Roland S. Howard, and did the Dogs in Space soundtrack. You know, was in Max Q with Michael Hutchinson.
That's right. I knew the name and I was thinking, is it Max Q? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ollie's and the music he makes these days is still just incredible. He's a complete pioneer of electronic music in Australia. Anyway, I was at this bar and I looked over and thought, that's fucking Ollie Olsen. Jesus. And no, one of Ollie's bands were massive in my family. And so I approached him and said, oh, Ollie, hi, my name is Tim. And he went, oh, yeah, you're the rock guy. And I thought, oh no, Ollie's he's a cynic, and he think, but that's just Ollie's manner. And we ended up having a really long chat, and then communication, just kind of writing to each other. And that was just one example where I thought, oh shit, he's the angry guy at the end of the bar, but he's not. He expected me to be a certain way, and I was probably a little bit more, a little softer around the edges than he thought. And I had no bravado about me because he's done so much, and I had so much respect for him. So when running into folks from, like, for example, he name dropping, because I guess that's what people dig, but Bernard Fanning's one of my best mates, always will be. We're just joined at the hip. We don't talk all the time, but we talk every couple of months and have these big chats. And he's another one who has this buoyancy. He tolerates fools less easily than he did decades ago, but just has this buoyancy and humour about him that maybe you wouldn't expect would be there.
Yeah.
Missy Higgins lives up the road from me, and she's a great mate. And considering what happened to her was completely different experience from all of us, but she became massively successful very quickly, relatively. And the way that she's handled it is very different to the way that us older guys did, but I'm totally in admiration of it. And so when we get together, we talk about, hey, how are our kids going, families. And Daniel Johns, I spoke to him a couple of years ago on the phone. Again, none of us went through that experience. I'm just glad that he's around, and I've heard demos of his new songs, and they are going to fry your fucking mind. And then other folks who weren't in big bands. I was at a couple of bars in Sydney a few years ago, and I ran into this guy, Ben Aylward, of this band Swirl, who we played with a lot. Loved catching up with him. Peter Fenton of Crow, loved catching up with him. I'm on the chats. I'm trying to avoid going back. I'm trying to avoid going back to work, Becko. That's the thing.
Well, I really enjoyed watching the dynamics at Concert for Kate. 2 years ago now. God, time flies. And I was there as a photographer pretty much, and just sort of watching and photographing, and yeah, it was Bernard and yourself and the band, and
Paul Dempsey, yeah.
And it was just
Sally Seltman.
Yeah, and Paul Dempsey.
Sally again. Sally. Like she's such a solid person, and she presents herself as, she's got her difficulties, as we all do, with, some nervous issues, but such a solid human. That was a very, very special night. Kate was in such fine form. I ran into Kate in a pub after a Hard Ons rehearsal a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, she's doing well. So
that's good.
All worked out well.
Oh, that's great. And look, I know you meet people along the way, and your idols, and I think one of the great stories was when you were hanging out with the Who, and
yeah,
Pete Townsend ended up being really nice.
He was gorgeous. Well, Davey and I, after we played, I don't think we were allowed any hard liquor backstage or something. So we went, found something else because we were so nervous, and then came back. And then after the Who's show, Russ was chatting to Pete in the corridor, and they were kind of furrowed-browed chatting, because Pete grabbed Russ and said, "You're the fucking You Am I drummer." And Russ said, "Yes, Peter." And said, "Yeah, my son really fucking loves your band." And they got chatting, and then we came over and Pete introduced himself. And forget all that big nose shit. Pete Townsend up close is so handsome. He's just got this beautiful way of presenting himself. And he told us all about the Who Small Faces tour of '68, this infamous tour, and just held court. And we said, "Oh, do you want to come in for a beer?" And he said, "Well, I won't have beer, but I'll come in." And he just told us all the stories about Steve Marriott getting them into trouble, almost getting Pete beaten up by a gang in a nightclub in Sydney because Steve Marriott went off with someone's girlfriend and blamed her, somehow got Pete implicated. Then on the last night of the tour, that was the big photograph time, because we're not big photographers. Hey, can we have photos together? So
Yeah.
we got a professional said, I want to get you guys together. But after the show, Pete had a massive Barney with his missus on the phone, and we could hear it. They were having troubles like couples do, and so the photos got nixed because we wanted to go out and get into trouble, and so there's no photos existing of us. And but we met up with Zach Starkey when he was playing with Oasis a couple of years later, and that was great. Zach talking about his stories playing with the Who. They were fun shows.
You're so lucky to be able to play with your idols. I mean, obviously there are other idols that probably don't end up being as nice. I mean, I remember, I think it was Gene Simmons, and you wrote a song about it or whatever it was. Well,
the first time I met Gene was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But then I had a chat with him last year for my radio show on Double J, and Gene and I talked it was just an hour, but he wrote back to me through his publicist and said, if you want to talk for another couple of hours, let's just do it. And I was a little too overwhelmed because it was such a beautiful talk, and he was so generous and so lovely. He was himself. He's got opinions, and we talked about this opinion this perception of him, which is right, in that he's a businessman first.
Yeah, yeah.
And we think he gets lambasted for that, but other folks like Chuck Berry gets lambasted for it. And we're wondering how fair that is, I mean, and Gene's done said some what I consider some pretty silly things, but he was so good and so generous. And it wasn't just because I knew every B-side of every Kiss single that's ever been released. It was because I think he wanted to impart knowledge. He wanted to share knowledge. He asked questions. Like he contacted me straight after and said, anytime, and please come backstage when Kiss tour, and let's have a cup of tea, share a biscuit, whatever. I don't know, have a chat. Joan Jett, I played a show with her when I was playing with the Posies a couple of decades ago. I don't think there's been any big sort of stars or celebrities that have been kind of shit house. It tends to be people at my level. Has time passed me by? Was I worth it? Did I deserve anything? They're just always questioning themselves. What a fucking pain in the ass. But people at that big level, apart from Eric Clapton, just they're 100% been really good people.
I've heard that's been said before. The big bands, they're just a machine, and they run well and they're humble. And it's often those middle level bands are the ones that are frustrated and feel out of place, and probably a couple of dud albums after the good one and whatever.
The classic example, I guess, that everyone's got an opinion on Dave Grohl, 99.9% completely positive, because, he is a genuinely lovely person. He's omnipresent, and so you can feel people a little like, really, again, and people have their opinions on the Foo Fighters. I do too. But last time we played with the Foo Fighters was a few years ago in Brisbane, and Dave came bounding into our dressing room because I think he was after a cigarette, and we had darts, and so we're smoking and talking. And I mentioned that we played with Nirvana in 91, and he went, "Oh my God, I knew you." He didn't remember, but he pretended he remembered, which is really generous and really lovely. I mean, he didn't need to do that. He's pretty assured, but again, he's got an energy that I just don't know where that comes from. Gallagher brothers, again, everyone's got an opinion. They are the best people to tour with I've ever been on. Just so much fun. I guess a band like Rocket from the Crypt, that was the best tour we ever did. They were the best band I've ever seen, apart from Red Cross and the Replacements. We played, playing with the Replacements. Westberg was fucking amazing. Had recourse on reading Mark Lanigan's book, because we toured with the Screaming Trees a bunch, and remembering how he was on tour. And it was pretty obvious that he was, struggling health-wise, but never gave a bad performance, and was always brilliant company. I caught up with him, but I think we were in Portland a couple of years ago. I was doing a solo show up there, and again, what a fucking beautiful man. He's kind of in the top 5 singers all time. Tex is up top.
Yeah.
I when speaking with rep company people or PR people, like, who's the worst? tell us that. So I'm going to ask you now.
Yeah, we all want to hear
who's
that.
Who's the worst? I want to hear that from you. Who's the worst?
Well, the thing is, going back to the Gallagher brothers, you don't hear the good stories. You know, like you're saying that they were really good to play with. You don't hear that because it doesn't sell magazines, and you don't hear that. But the truth is, when it comes to, from my point of view, with the radio and doing interviews and stuff, there aren't many. You know, like generally, most of the bands you catch up with, they're all really warm and accommodating, and they're up for a chat. I, for the life of me, can only tell you one that was difficult, and that was James Blunt. That's all I can think of, you know, off the top of my head.
Oh, James. He's, I don't know, James. He's the way that people, let alone musicians, act towards people who they don't have, there's nothing to be gained. I guess in our situation, yourself and me, artists want to be presented a certain way, and you can do something for them. You know, someone like me, I guess, unless I go to someone as a fan, then whoever it is may feel, I don't need this person. And that's how you can judge a person, you know, when there's nothing to be gained. There's been a couple of, Harvey Keitel, I did a film with Harvey a bunch of years ago. Well, I was just a, bit part, but, he didn't need to be nice to me, and so he wasn't. You know, he got me in a headlock and threw me on the ground and held me on the ground and whispered in my ear, I hate doing rehearsals, kid. Kate Winslet was on the same film, and she didn't be nice to me because she didn't know I was in the film. And as it worked out, I had to do some very uncomfortable things with Kate, and she was amazing. And we had to talk about protocols of physical, almost physical assault on camera. And brilliant and generous. I'm not saying that Harvey Keitel is a bad person and Kate Winslet's a wonderful person. It's just in those situations they didn't have to be nice to me. And
you hear these stories about rock stars going through phases, and look, to give James Blunt credit, that was right at the beginning when he was just got 2 number 1 hits around the world, and he didn't have to be nice to anyone, but it would have been nice. But 4 albums later, same interview really, and was great, you know. And it's funny how you got these cycles of asshole where really nice at the beginning, first album success, becomes an asshole, and then becomes nice again once they hit the plateau. You know. Well,
yeah, when I did a recovery thing interview with Dylan Lewis and Jane Gazzo, and Jane's a very close friend, and sort of chat regularly. But I was talking to Dylan, and we were looking back at old interviews, and we were so just narky. And one, it was, sure, it's an early show and all that, but that narkiness wasn't our real selves, because as soon as the cameras were off, we were probably great company. But as soon as the cameras went on, it seemed to be the style of the time that you acted a bit churlish. And I'm sort of loath to say it really, but when Nirvana took off and that second record got really big, and their particularly Kurt's style of interview technique was so honest, and he's kind of exhausted and a little bewildered. And it seemed like for a couple of years after that, as a band, if you answered anything with enthusiasm, you're just a putz. And so for decades, people were just, I don't know. I guess the only one who didn't really do it was Cram, who's so endlessly enthusiastic.
No, how does he do it?
Well, he's built a different way. We did a tour together a couple of years ago, and I wasn't in a good way, and I was kind of really short with him one night. And the next morning I called him and I said, "Can we go and get a beer or a cup of tea?" And I said, "Man, I'm being a dick." And he said, "Hey, doesn't matter. You were tired. It doesn't matter. And there was he held no grudge, like a million other people would. He's built a different way. I'd say the Energizer Bunny, but it's more nuanced than that. He's just a very, very enthusiastic guy. And decades ago, I would have been, "Oh, come on, man, give it a break." But now I'm like, fucking God bless that guy. I love that guy, because just endless enthusiasm.
And it's true. There was a phase where in the 90s you had to be cool. And I think in a way it's a Triple J thing too, where, a lot of bands when they start off Gang of Youths were known for it, where in their early
Oh, really?
days. Yeah, they were really, really, no, I wouldn't say difficult, but they were trying to be kind of cool, and so all the answers were one-word answers, and there was a bit of that. But now, all those years and albums later, so much better and so good to deal with, and I think it's that thing where you got to be a bit cool with the media, and it's just a thing.
Maybe I remember when I was hanging out with another band who were acquaintances of theirs, and Gang Youths had this reputation as being a pop band trying to present themselves as something else, and which is a horrible little conundrum because, one, David Singer,
Yeah.
fantastic singer, songwriter, is the whole package. Then I guess there's this backstage thing where you might get made to feel, for lack of a better term, cool, and a bit standoffish and da-da-da. And, oh, man, and I haven't seen David in a couple of years. The last time we saw each other was maybe 3 years ago. And we just had this big hug and a quick chat. And all I wanted to know was I just want to say, don't let any cool tousle head rock band get you down. You've got it all. You just enjoy it. I didn't say all of that because, who wants to hear that from a D-lister? But that thing, I think still exists. I even see photos of pop stars, whether it's, Kid Laroi or Bieber, and they give that world-weary, hair in the face, hand on head kind of look. It's like, gee, I hope you're having some fun in there,
Yeah.
Don't encourage the world to beat you down because it's going to beat your ass at some stage. When there's the chance to enjoy it, then do. But having said that, if you want to slouch around and look like you've been on tour for 30 years, then if that's a jam, then fucking do it. And don't listen to people like me.
Well, the thing is, in interviews you've done, over the years, you've always looked back on the 90s almost with a bit of negativity. And I was going to ask you was that the pressure of coming up through the ranks and having to prove yourself and having record companies to answer to and all that sort of stuff?
I think that no one wants to be told the best that they've done is behind them. And it wasn't disdain. I just wanted to move on to the next thing. And Hifi Way and Ali Daly have got good spirit to them, and I'm glad we made them. And those records, I'm really glad that they did well. But it just wasn't the best time of my life, I feel embarrassed that I didn't enjoy myself as much as I could have. But I felt at the time that, okay, those records are good, but I really want to make something great. Then I had a really difficult time. I found marriage really difficult because of the responsibility that I couldn't match and I didn't step up to. And all that happened really, really quickly, trying to be a parent and trying to hold a family together. And so that happened right at the end of the 90s. But during that decade, there were really great times. I made some really great friends, but it wasn't time to really just enjoy it because I was just quite serious. I'd just gotten over what I felt was I felt I got over a mental illness, and I was so keen to hold on to that I just didn't want to blow it. And I was off medication, and the band were doing well, and I just felt the dedication to the band that I was just a bit serious. And so I look back on that time personally as me being a bit of a curmudgeon. There's some really great music that came out of it. And more than anything, the touring circuit, you're younger than I am, but for anyone who kind of wasn't there, the touring circuit was insane. You could play 7 nights a week easy.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
Albury, then you go Yarrawonga, Wagga Wagga University. It was about that. And what happened to that? It's a lot to do with the different way that University Union set up Triple J, which I don't really have a lucid point on what that did to the touring setup. It helped, and then I think in a way it hindered, but I'm not able to represent that very well. That was really good fun, because you'd run into other bands at truck stops. You'd run into the gals from Fur at a truck stop. You'd run into Magic Dirt and at a BP in Whyalla. compare notes and swap cigarettes and drink beers and stuff. That's the bit I miss. So it'd be great if that touring could go together. Because meeting in airports when people are fucking on fucking headphones and laptops, Chris, Jesus Christ.
Fuck, I know.
Get a pad and a pen and draw genitals, or talk when we can all talk together again.
Yeah. Oh, look, I really hope after all this is settled down, I really hope that we could all, just communicate a bit better rather than being so insular, which is just a thing that's happened,
Well, I think that one of the things, social media stuff, the impetus from within bands and from people working with bands is get on the socials, plug this and that. And what Becko reckons happened is the bands have stopped listening to each other's records because everyone's so busy on promoting themselves and they feel that they need to do that, and maybe they do, but no one listens to each other's records anymore. I remember when Sidewinder's Tangerine record came out, anyone I spoke to was listening to that record because we weren't putting stuff on the grams or Facebook. I recently, as part of a program I had to go through, it's a blah, 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 blah thing, and went off all socials. It's great. Now I've got more time to read and to actually work on songs and finish painting jobs, which I really should be doing. Now, look, it's raining again. I don't have to go back. All right. But, just that relentless thing, tweet this, Instagram that, we're being made to feel now as if that's what you've got to do.
Yeah.
And I really want that somehow out of the equation, because it just stops you listening to things, and not your own things, other people's records, friends' records. So now that I've gone off, I can listen to my friends' records, and I'm listening to the Neptune Power Federation, their whole back catalogue, just endlessly. There's this insane country singer from Newcastle, Ben Leith, who works at Rudderless Records in Newcastle.
Yeah.
Send it to me.
I love, by the way, how people still share and recommend music to people like yourself, and I think that's still really cool.
There's only so much you can get from algorithms.
Yeah.
Rusty sends us stuff each week. He makes comps and sends them, and they're so obscure that it's just a treasure trove. The Hard Ons have the biggest record collections of any band I've ever seen in my life, and so I had this big chat with Blackie yesterday about Yes, and so we talked about them, and then Van de Graaff Generator, and Peter Hamill's solo stuff. We talked about that, and people still are trading records and sending records, and that's all still happening.
Yeah.
Like this band Clowns, Melbourne kind of punk rock band.
Yeah.
Clowns, they run their own record label, Damaged, and I'm hopefully going to see them this afternoon because they got the new Void record and a bunch of other stuff they want to hear, and their new demos, and that all still happens.
Ray from the Hard Ons, he still works at Utopia, doesn't he?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Because I've walked in there. That's part of the fun about going to Utopia. It's like, oh, there he is, and just say good day.
The great man.
Yeah.
His stories from there are so great, and because he goes buying for the store so that he gets sent around the world used to, and will again. Ray's book is going to be something else. I don't know what the prep is for it, but he's the greatest storyteller in rehearsals, because their rehearsals, this tiny room, Jay Wally of Friends of Rom, I think it's his studio, and when Ray tells a story, fucking hell, you sit down and you're going to get a good one. His story of meeting Nick Cave, my Nick Cave story, I thought was funny, but Ray's is just so great. Can I tell you my Nick Cave story?
I was just about to say, can you tell us your Nick Cave story? Yeah.
So I did a play a bunch of years ago with Bojana Novakovic, who's in this new series, Love Me. It's a fantastic series. And anyway, name drop for a Friends TV show. So Nick and Warren did the music for it. It was a play called Wojciech, an old German play from the late 19th century, I believe. And so Warren and I did a couple of days of press, and Warren and I are old acquaintances. He's the best guy in the world. My daughter came, she was still living in Australia, so we went and had this day doing press. Next day, Warren gave me a call and said, g'day, Timmy, look, just here with the great man. And he said it that way. do you mind if he has a chat to you? And I went, yeah, sure. And so Nick gets on the phone and says, oh, Tim, hey, it's Nick. I don't believe we've met. And I said, no, we haven't. We've got friends in common. But he said, yeah, well, anyway, I've got to cut to the chase. I'm here with the kids at Collingwood Children's Farm. And said, Tim, in the Sergeant Major's song in Wojciech, I said, yep, we know it well, Nick. I said, is the line about wild English cunt still in there? And I went, yes, Nick, it's in there. It gets a great reaction. You can tell the astonishment in the faces of the audience. So, yeah, wild English cunt, yes, because they left it out of the Norwegian version. I went, yeah, no, don't worry, Nick, wild English cunt is still in there. And he went, well, okay, Tim, I'll see you later then. All right, Nick, see you, mate. Ray's is longer. It's just great. And it shows, one, Ray's the best storyteller, and really, what a dude Nick is,
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this, and thanks so much for your time. And by the way, congratulations
pleasure,
on the beer. I meant to bring it up. I went for a drive from here in Canberra down to Tumut, just because it's a nice drive, and popped in the brewery, and there it was, IPA. Couldn't believe it.
I don't mind it at all.
I hope things recover quickly.
We do. What can we do but just try and do the right things now, and we'll see everyone out there. It's real pleasure to speak to you, Chris. And if we get to Canberra and if you're in town, please come and we'll say go. All right, good man, Chris.
We'll try and have a beer.
All right, man. See you later.
What a great bloke. I felt like I was sitting down having a beer with him. We kind of were, but just between cities. But that's Tim Rogers from UMI. If you missed part 1 of the chat, particularly where he talks about meeting Mick Jagger for the first time and what they spoke about backstage, and also he revealed what is in the UMI rider. Make sure you catch it up on all your podcast providers, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google. Subscribe now. It'll arrive in your inbox. Next week, an Aussie rocker who is trying some different stuff because there aren't many gigs happening at the moment. So what is he doing to earn some extra cash? We'll find out next week on The Rider with Becko. Check us out on Instagram, The Rider Pod. This is The Rider with Becko. Catch you then.